pleased to introduce our speaker, a friend, colleague, lives a couple blocks from me, and he happens to be at the area of the Santa Barbara earthquake for this in Centennial, which he'll be sharing us. But I'm pleased to hear that. But he's a retired professor of geology, geophysics at
Ah,
Franklin Marshall College, and
that's
but he's presented before to us on the International Geophysical Year. I think many of us remember that of that beautiful kind of black and orange stamp, and where I learned about the Van Allen radiation belts. But this how looking at the geophysics of the world, Earth, plate tectonics, all together, and how it moved into space exploration. This is a fascinating field, and he really gives a lot of good information from that. And he has the blog, and Rob, too, send it to me, and I'll send that out again. Just make sure, those who want to get it, get it. And I
Okay.
won't send it every month, but they'll let you know if they want to get it, because I do enjoy seeing that. So I guess without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Rob Sternberg to present his story of the 1925 Santa Barbara air earthquake. What was the date? Was it today's date?
It's the 29th.
29th. Wow, we're getting close. Well, you're all
Yeah.
set. Just go
Okay.
on your share screen, and
Okay. So you're okay. You can see the presentation right now, right?
I don't see it now. I just see the Zoom.
Oh, okay.
share the screen.
You
You
want to
don't
hit
see the presentation right now,
we did, but
but it's gone.
it's just a Zoom. You might want to back out and try again.
Okay.
And go into the share.
All right. So yeah, I am actually, not on my usual computer, and I hope that the tech goes okay. So let's see here.
And you're in a hotel, right?
I'm in my motel,
Yeah.
and okay,
Here we
how's that?
go. You're all set then, Rob.
Okay, good. So I saw if there's a
Oh,
picture
Rob,
of
do you
me.
want questions before? I mean, during or after?
So just because of the way I'm having a hard time sort of simultaneously seeing the Zoom and my slides,
So we
it'd
will wait.
be a little easier to wait until the end.
Okay. And folks, if
Hopefully,
you can refer to your question by the slide number, that will help, because he does have the slide numbers on there, which I think is always a good thing to do.
yeah. Okay. So I have a picture of me on here when I was a bit younger and teaching at Franklin and Marshall College. I'm not a seismologist, but I'm a geophysicist. So I was the closest we had to a seismologist, and was in charge of a couple of different generations of seismographs that we ran. This was the old style drum recorder, and now everything is digital. But we used to have to change the paper on this every 2 days with our settings that we used, and kept it going for a number of years. So I am, as Paul said, I'm currently in Santa Barbara, and we actually scheduled this presentation, I think late in 2024. I was looking ahead to the Centennial of the earthquake, which is in a couple of days, and hoping that I could beef up my collection a little bit and then present on it. It's been a little harder acquiring materials than I thought, but I'll show you what I have. And as I said, I'm in sort of an unfamiliar computing environment, but hopefully we'll get through this all pretty smoothly here. So Santa Barbara is a great community from what I've seen of it. It's a little bit bigger than Lancaster, north of Los Angeles. We actually flew into here directly via Dallas, coming from Harrisburg. I'll show you a little bit of the geography. And there's been different peoples that have lived here. The Chumash Indians have some pictographs left behind. Then the Spanish came in. Just today, we were at the Presidio, where the Spanish fort was. And actually, after the earthquake in 1925, one opportunity that provided for the city was to sort of try to make its architecture a little more uniform. And so they've really gone for a sort of Spanish style architecture. And there's several kind of well-known buildings here. The Mission, we'll see pictures of that. The Presidio, UC Santa Barbara, and the county courthouse, which is known for its beauty. We'll see, I think, a picture of that as well. So the earthquake, it happened on June 29th, 1925. So we are having the Centennial in 4 days, and there's lots actually going on in the town here. So I actually stopped in Santa Barbara in December on my way to visit my son in Thailand. And I did a little research, light research related to the earthquake. And so decided to come back for this week for some of these Centennial events. It was a moderate sized earthquake, but because the epicenter was in or very close to the city, it did a fair amount of damage. The death count, today I was actually seeing an exhibit in the museum, the historical museum, and I've seen death counts of 11, 12, 13, 14. It's somewhere in there. But a lot of the downtown district was damaged. They were lucky in that very alert public officials turned off the gas and electricity very soon after the earthquake occurred. So they didn't have a fire like in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, where lots of gas lines were ruptured. But one of the significances of this earthquake was that along with the earlier 1906 San Francisco earthquake and the later 1933 Long Beach earthquake, it really raised consciousness about the earthquake hazard in California and nationwide, and caused a lot more attention to be given to appropriate architecture. This is also in the fairly early days of modern seismology, so these earthquakes also provided a lot of impetus for thinking about earthquakes and developing better instrumentation to measure them. I did speak about my earthquake collection in general. I think it was 2 years ago. And then last year in the fall of the open house, I also had a poster about some earthquakes. So I will show a couple of slides that some of you might have seen before if you saw any of those, either of those talks. I guess I can't resist a bit of the calling of being a former professor that I like to teach a little bit about earthquakes as well as showing my philatelic items. There's a nice poster here that is kind of used for the events that are happening this week and that have happened in the previous month. There's actually a nice website. It's eq25.org, where there is a listing of all the events that are taking place. Anyway, a bit of an outline that I'll follow with the slides to come. So again, these are slides that I have shown at my previous talk. It might look familiar, but this is a seismicity map for the whole world. The colors represent the different depths of the earthquakes. And there are patterns here that were not well understood for a long time until the theory of plate tectonics gelled in the 1960s. Earthquakes happen non-randomly, so we can see that they tend to be concentrated in belts. And we now know that these are plate boundaries. There are, as we'll see, some earthquakes that don't happen at plate boundaries, but most do. And we'll also see that the deeper earthquakes with these other colors here happen at so-called subduction zones where one plate dives beneath another. But anyway, these were patterns that were known, but not explained for a long time. But now we have a much better handle with the theory of plate tectonics. As Paul mentioned, things that happened during the International Geophysical Year, databases that were derived then helped in the formulation of that theory in the 10, 15 years after that. So this is another view of the Earth surface showing the major plates. And so the plates are kind of like your kitchen plates. They're broad, they're thin, and they're brittle. So when the plates break, to simplify it a little bit, you get the earthquakes. So there are three types of boundaries. There are convergent boundaries where plates come together. This plate and this plate are converging, And in this case, one subducts or dives beneath the other. So when a plate subducts and earthquakes happen on the subducting slab, that's where you get the deeper earthquakes that we saw in the previous slide. But quakes can also happen where plates split apart. So these plates are splitting apart from each other, and you get earthquakes here. That occurs, for instance, on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, including Iceland. And we see the arrows moving apart here for that kind of plate boundary. So we're in California today, at least in the central part, where we have the San Andreas Fault. And that's an example of what's called a transform boundary, where plates are sliding by each other. And we also get earthquakes on that type of boundary as well. So it's really the earthquake locations that helped to delineate these plates as the theory of plate tectonics was developing. Now, this is actually, I created this map from a database of earthquakes provided by the U.S. Geological Survey. We used to, of course, in our scientific community, have wonderful databases available for everyone. Those are becoming harder to come by, but I created this image, which shows all earthquakes greater than magnitude 7. Magnitudes are a measure of the energy released by an earthquake from 1900 to the present. So that's here. And we see that the larger earthquakes in North America tend to occur along the plate boundaries that you can see in red. And they go into the Caribbean as well. Within the interior of the country, we have earthquakes, but they tend not to be as big. So for this insert map, I show in that same time period all magnitude 5 earthquakes. If you only looked at 7s and above, you wouldn't see more than a couple in the interior. But if you look at smaller magnitudes here, we see we have some in the interior, and there's a lot more of those smaller ones on the plate boundaries. This is shows you the number of earthquakes per year versus magnitude. Santa Barbara was about a 6.5 magnitude. And basically with this graph, it tells us that in the United States, there's about one earthquake, 6.5 or larger per year. Most of those will be, again, on the plate boundaries. So I think that's the seismology lesson for today. And I've been collecting philatelic items, or at least I call them philatelic items, about earthquakes for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, something like that. I'll have to figure out when exactly I started. In this figure, I am listing all U.S. earthquakes that had 10 or more fatalities. These are actually sorted from highest to lowest in terms of fatalities. And I have items, philatelic items, for most of these events. The only ones I don't have any representatives of are these two 1868 earthquakes in Hawaii and California. But all these other events I have some item from. The green ones, the San Francisco and Long Beach earthquakes, I discussed in my presentation to the club last year. And then in the open house last fall, I had a poster on the Loma Prieta earthquake. And so today I'm doing the Santa Barbara earthquake. I guess on this list, it had the lowest number of fatalities, but it makes the list. So it's still a pretty significant event. In my collection, I have items, and I'll say in a minute what I mean by items. I have about 550 items right now that represent 35 or so North American earthquakes, and I'm including the Caribbean and Central America and Mexico, but not South America. There are actually a couple of items I have from earthquakes. So these are postcards where people wrote about an earthquake, and I couldn't identify it by the date or the place that they wrote from. But most of them can be identified. the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, I have by far the most items from, followed by the Long Beach earthquake. And I also have some items from the USS Constitution, or Old Ironsides, because she was actually in the port of Long Beach when that earthquake occurred. Hebgen Lake, it was an earthquake in Montana, as in, this is in the next slide where I show my criteria for collecting. Usually I try to get items that have been mailed, but I made an exception for Hebgen Lake. Most of the postcards I have for that event were not mailed, but because that didn't occur in a city, it occurred in the countryside, the picture postcards kind of really show, you might say, the geology of the event. And so I decided to relax my usual criteria and collect almost any postcard related to that earthquake. Santa Barbara, I have a modest number of items, 30 or so, and the same for the 1964 Alaskan earthquake. I've been hoping to get more from Santa Barbara in the past year, but I've found them difficult to come by that satisfy my criteria. We were in the History Museum this afternoon looking at the exhibit they have on the earthquake, and I think they have all the items. That's why I can't get any. So I've done the best I could, but still looking for them. So first I want to show you kind of the types of items I have. The United States has the Stamp Committee for the United States has explicitly said they don't want to do any stamps related to natural disasters. So actually there's no earthquake stamps that the United States has ever issued. So for Central and America and the Caribbean, I do have some earthquake stamps, but for the United States, I have some covers with earthquake messages on them, cachets, but most of what I have are postcards. So I have picture postcards that are black and white, picture postcards that are in color. I have postcard folders. I'll show those too. I try to get postcards that were posted, but for the Santa Barbara event, I only have 6 of those. That's been a bit of a disappointment. And another category is the real photo postcards, which 1903 Kodak put out a camera that take the negatives of the photograph and develop them onto the back of postcard stock, and then either save those or send those. So for a couple of decades, those were quite popular, and I have 11 of those in my Santa Barbara collection, and one of the folders consists of real photo postcards. So you could argue, and we could argue this later if you like, that maybe my earthquake collection is more deltiology than philately. Deltiology is the term coined for the collection and study of postcards. I'm calling it philately because that's really my roots, and because at least my goal is to get posted cards or letters, then I think that part is more honestly philately, and you could do some more serious postal history with those if you wanted to. Not so much my specialty, but there's some interesting stuff that you can get out of those posted cards. So here are the criteria that I try to satisfy. I try to get actually items that were mailed, that were postmarked soon after the earthquake, that were postmarked from near where the earthquake occurred, the epicenter, that has a message about the event that can be read in decent condition and not too expensive. I buy most of my items on eBay, occasionally at postcard shows. It's been hard to get all of these for the Santa Barbara quake, but that's the goal. That's what I'm shooting for. It's been easiest for the San Francisco earthquake, I guess, because there's probably were so many more postcards sent for that event that it's actually not so hard to find cards that satisfy these criteria when I search on eBay. Okay, so first I'm going to show you the types of items in the collection. And let's start off with postcard folders. I mentioned that I had 2 of those. This was actually one item in my collection that I saw in the museum today. So it's a folder that has a flap, and on the back of it, can't really see it here, but there's a slit so that the flap fits into the slit. And then there's an accordion of cards. This is just an example, one of the kind of famous photos, one example of a church that was destroyed by the earthquake. But there are 12 different photos in this particular folder. So this one maybe can't read it too well off the image, but this was postmarked it's actually in Santa Barbara, sent on August 17th, so about 2 months after the quake, sent to Wisconsin, and it depicts the Santa Barbara mission, one of the famous missions in California that was damaged by the earthquake. And I think I have my other postcard folder in quotes here. So this wasn't quite a folder, but it was actually an envelope. It does have an address on it, Los Angeles, but there's no postage on it. So I guess I'm not certain if this was really sent or not, but it was at least sendable. And inside of this envelope, there were 21 of the real photo postcards. And here's a couple of them. So I'm including the catalog number, my catalog number for these. I have all my items on a spreadsheet, and all the images are in Flickr. So anybody that would be curious to see the stuff, I can make that available to you. So this postcard and these real photo postcards, there was actually like a little needle where you could scratch a caption into the negative that would then be reproduced onto the photo positive. And on this, the caption is delivering refreshments to the Marines on duty. An amazing number of people from the military, from police forces, firefighters showed up in Santa Barbara almost immediately to help out with the recovery efforts. Because the gas and electricity were shut off and people were actually living out in the streets for quite some time. So this card has a caption, scenes in Santa Barbara, time of quake. People were living outdoors without water and gas. So here they are cooking, and there were tents that people were living in for a while after the event. So then, okay, here's my ideal collectible item. So it's a card that was posted. I guess it's not quite the ideal because although it was postmarked in Santa Barbara only a month after the quake, it was sent to Oakland. But the message, there's a message that is readable, but it actually doesn't really seem to have anything to do with the earthquake itself. Dear Mona, I'm in Santa Barbara now. It's 11 p.m. We stay here till 3 a.m. Everybody fine. Love, Effie. So by the times, I'm thinking maybe they were traveling on the train. At least I haven't checked. There is a train, Amtrak train that comes through here now. I'm pretty sure there was one back in the day on the same route, but it doesn't mention the quake. And this shows one of the buildings that was heavily damaged by the quake, the Knights of Pythias building, or hall in the so-called GOO building with Marines patrolling. Knights of Pythias, I think it still exists. It's a fraternal organization and a secret society that was founded after the Civil War. Stamp was upside down. I don't know if that's sort of a sign of distress or not, but there it is. Okay, so this is another one that doesn't mention the quake, but it shows the county jail, and the front basically peeled off the building. About 20 inmates escaped. Apparently, most of them returned, I think, on their own volition after the quake was over. And this one, again, was sent from Santa Barbara 3 weeks after the quake. And the message, dearest Louisa, sorry you weren't in when I went down to see you. I'm having a wonderful time. I don't know how long I will stay here until I get tired of it, I guess. Lots of love, Lawrence Emberley. So I'm starting more than I used to try to look up people that sign cards and people that receive them. I think on this one, it's an older one in my collection. I don't think I've checked that yet, but those of you that do postal history, you know that that can lead to some interesting finds. So This is in its same. This is the same image, and it looks like it's in a real photo postcard that was printed in the same era. I should have pointed this out in the last slide, but you can actually see if you look closely here the sink and toilet in one of the jail rooms. Interesting thing about this card is it wasn't sent until 1987. So I think it's maybe in my entire earthquake collection, this is the card that was sent longest after the card was actually originally produced. So again, there's nothing in the message here. Well, the message actually does say this is of the 1925 earthquake in Santa Barbara, California. Compliments of Hildegard. Guess she used to live here. And actually, I had some contact with one of the authors who's presenting this week here in Santa Barbara. This didn't really register with me. Well, I think at that time when I first posted this, I wasn't aware it was the jail because it doesn't say on the card itself it was the jail. But Betsy Green, who looked at this, a local author, said that's the jail, which I've since verified. And that was maybe a joke that she used to live in the jail. Another posted card, real photo postcard. This is one of the photos you see a lot. The Hotel Californian had just opened up a week or two before the earthquake, and it was destroyed. So this one, again, there's no stamp on it. So I don't know if it was perhaps sent in an envelope, but it was the date that is dated August 3rd, 2 months after the quake. And there is a message related to the quake. Dear Cousin Ora, would like to hear from you again. The earthquake only cost me $2. The hotel on the reverse side of this was just finished, new. During July, I had a delightful 11 days to Los Angeles, Orange County, and Pasadena. Took in the great new something, which I can't quite figure out. As ever, Clayton. And another one that was posted, the picture on here is the San Marcos building. This is on State Street in Santa Barbara, which was then and still is the main commercial district. A lot of destruction happened on that street. 2 of the deaths occurred within the San Marcos building. And the first floor was a drugstore. So the postmark is from Santa Barbara on RPO, 10 months after the quake. And this one was easier to read than some. I appreciate that. Dear Alice, first stop en route to Frisco after a day of varied scenery from mountains to ocean. This is the way almost the entire business section looked a year ago, but hardly a trace of evidence remains. Our hotel entirely rebuilt since it happened at 7 a.m. before people had arrived at school stores, etc. So only about 40 were killed. Both well, hope you all are. This is kind of high. Like I said, it's usually the low teens that are given as the casualty figures. But true, the earthquake happened at 6:30 a.m. So the city was kind of lucky that people weren't really out and about yet. So another one that was, I think this is the last example I have of cards that were posted. This shows the Santa Barbara mission. So the towers had damage. There was other damage in the front of the mission, but the core of it survived. Again, this card had a stamp on it, which was taken off. This was sent. I had a little trouble with this one, but my wife, who's decent with French and a little bit of online translation, we were able to get most of this translated from French to English. So this was sent 3 weeks after the quake from Santa Barbara to Switzerland. And translating from the French, at least approximately, Dear Roger, here's a view of the terrible earthquake, which we something in Santa Barbara. The city is partly destroyed. It was appalling. Dear Friendship, Pierre. So those are examples of some of the types of items I have, and including all the examples I have of postcards with text on them. So now I'm going to do a little geography about the earthquake. I try not to get too hung up in this, but this is from Google Maps. This stretch of the coast, Santa Barbara is here, and it's unusual in that it's actually an east-west stretch of the coast. Most of course, the West Coast is north-south, or at least northwest-southeast. And on this sort of topographic image, you can kind of see, so again, Santa Barbara is here, and the San Andreas Fault goes right through here. So we're not quite on the San Andreas Fault. We're on some other faults, which I'll show you in a minute, relating to this mountain range here. These are the transverse ranges because they sort of cross over a little bit the general trend of the San Andreas Fault. So this is the North American plate over here and the Pacific plate over here. But you could say that these earthquakes in Santa Barbara have occurred at least in this plate boundary zone. So they're kind of related to the San Andreas Fault, although not directly on them. This was my flight in when I visited in December, and you can kind of see evidence of geologic deformation here. So you can see the mountain ranges. Santa Barbara is sort of in here. These are the Santa Ynez Mountains. You can see folded layers of rock. These are rock layers that have been tilted as parts of folds, and you're kind of seeing them almost like edge on, as if you took a stack of paper and kind of turned it upside down. You'd see the different pages. So these are different layers of sedimentary rock. And you can actually see, almost see, on the coastline, these are actually, this is sort of a faulted area here. These are cliffs, and these are so-called uplifted marine terraces. So these are areas that were beveled fairly flat in the submarine environment by waves, but then there were earthquakes prehistorically, which lifted the area up. And as a result, you get the cliff that represents that zone of uplift. And then here are some pictures I took as I toured around in December. Again, you can see here some of these sedimentary layers that have really been deformed. Okay, so these have been folded around. Folding and faulting are two types of geologic deformation, and this is more folding than faulting. Here are some strata, some layers at the beach that have been tilted as well. And then this is a former reservoir. We'll see a postcard of that later. That is now an open space, but this was also affected by the earthquake. I'll have a postcard of that later, and then you can see some of the uplifted mountains behind that. But it's very complex geology. I don't even really understand it. But as a result, there have been several historic earthquakes. So these are the epicenters, which are the points on the surface above where the earthquake happened in the subsurface, the 1925 quake, and others with their magnitudes. So these are all modest-sized earthquakes. This was a research paper where they actually relocated the earthquake. It had thought to have its epicenter here, but they relocated it to here. And then this is the fault system that the earthquake, all these earthquakes seem to have happened on this fault system near the coast, but the epicenter was actually somewhat offshore. I somewhat naively thought when I visited in December, I'd be able to see the fault on which the earthquake occurred, but you really can't see it. But you can see some of these related faults and folds that represent the complex deformation that have occurred. And again, this is kind of a complicated picture. It's the cross section as if you cut through the earth and looked at it from the side. So it's thought that these earthquakes occurred someplace down here at the kind of confluence of some different faults that converge down here in the subsurface. So if the earthquakes occurred here, the epicenter would then be the point on the surface above it. And then there's also a big fault over here, which has caused some of the uplift that have led to the rising up of the Santa Ynez mountains. So from the same paper that I referenced in the last slide, this shows the so-called modified Mercalli intensities of some different locations. So magnitudes, Richter magnitudes tell us how much energy was released by an earthquake. That's like a single number for the earthquake, although there's different estimates of that. Intensities represent how much damage occurred, how people reacted. So it's sort of the impact of the quake, which also depends then on, was it in a populated area or not? What were the rocks like? Did they amplify the shaking? And so they can vary. And so we have the highest intensity in this area being 9. One thing that means is panic general. Like everybody feels it, everybody panics. And at least on the dots shown here, about the smallest you see is a 5, the green ones. That's felt indoors by practically everybody, outdoors by some people. Now, it turns out this is State Street here. This is downtown Santa Barbara. So we recorded some high intensities and got serious damage in this downtown area. So I'll be showing in a moment a few of the buildings on State Street or near State Street and how they were impacted. Another site was the Santa Barbara Mission, that's up here, and the Sheffield Dam and Reservoir, which I mentioned, which is kind of over here someplace. But we can see also that a lot of the highest intensities was along the same fault system that I've mentioned. So I think I've talked enough about geology, so let's get back to some locations. When I came here in December, I did some research at the Santa Barbara Historical Society, at the Gledhill Library. I actually wasn't 100% sure what I was looking for there, but with the help of the archivist, when I got there, he showed me a postcard collection, the John Fritsche collection. The total collection is over 7,000 postcards that are from Santa Barbara, and he had one series, which was a notebook on disasters and parades, and the earthquake cards in that notebook were sorted by which building they showed. So there were 41 album pages on the 1925 quake, totaling 350 or so cards. And what I did was I counted the number of cards for some of the different buildings that were shown. So that gave me a bit of an idea of at least which images were most common out there on different postcards. The ones that are in bold are buildings that I have in my collection. So I'm not going to show all of these, but I have a number of the places that were shown in here. This was also helpful because some of my postcards where the places hadn't been identified, they were identified in this collection. I've since realized that you can just Google your image and come up with what it is, even if the postcard isn't labeled. So these are some maps from a very useful publication I had written by a couple of geologists, which was a field guide to the earthquake. And in that guide, one thing they did was sort of a walking tour of downtown Santa Barbara. And so this shows some of the important locations and the suggested walking tour to see some of these buildings. So I did a similar walk when I was here in December. And so the State Street location I mentioned, kind of these are two of the points on the State Street area, going from the Presidio to the Granada building. There's another hotel which I showed before, and I'll show you again in a minute, the Californian Hotel. Here's the Mission, and here's the Sheffield Dam. And again, you can see some of the faults that bound this area that were related to the earthquake. So in thinking about how I wanted to present this to you, I kind of decided that what I wanted to do was a little bit like what has been called extreme philately. And extreme philately is when you take a stamp and take it to the site that the stamp represents. Let's say you had a stamp of the US Capitol, take it to the Capitol and take a photograph of your stamp in front of the Capitol. So I'm calling this semi-extreme deltiology because I'm doing it with postcards. And it's not quite extreme because I will be showing you comparisons of postcards of buildings that were affected and views of that same location today. But in most cases, the building has been changed and it doesn't quite look the same, but at least it's the same approximate view and viewing point for that site. So I've got then a few of these to show you. The Arlington Hotel was one of the luxury hotels in Santa Barbara in 1925. It was by that point 50 years old, although it had already been gutted once by fire. Then it was seriously damaged in the earthquake, and 2 of the casualties happened in that hotel. It was opened again as a movie theater in 1930, and it is still a theater today. And so when I was here in December, it was showing the movie Wicked. So the view is kind of different. There's a tower here, no tower here, and it might be actually showing different sides of the building. It's a little hard to get up close to it now, but that's why I call it semi-extreme deltiology. Best I can do, I think. This is again that Hotel Californian that I showed before. I think this is a different physical card, but it's the same image. And this is the location of the old Californian Hotel. It's across the street from the new Californian Hotel. The original was actually open, as I said, just a week or 2 before the earthquake, and then 11 days before the earthquake happened. And then it was reopened in 2017 across the street. So I don't know which is the appropriate comparison, but there's 2 that you might consider to be semi-extreme. The San Marcos building was on State Street. So here's the postcard I have. And I think all the postcards I'm showing here, most of them were not sent. So I'm just showing you the image sign. Here is the reconstruction today. So it housed the drugstore for a while, and the rebuilding, I guess, there's only 2 stories here. It was 4 before the earthquake, only 2 now. And here's the doorway, and you can see the very nice kind of architecture on that. This is the public library. We were inside there today, looking around. So again, the impact of the earthquake. The J, so in the couple of packets I have, SB002 is the packet, is the item number of the whole packet, and then I lettered the individual items within the packet. So this is a view of the library today, and I'm not sure whether this was actually kind of torn down or rebuilt completely or not, but at least if nothing else, they kept the same sort of shape of the windows, this one here compared to these over here. Inside the building, when I was there in December, they had a couple of photographs, and you can't really see it very well, but from the Edson Smith photo collection. He was a local photographer, African-American, and he had a lot of photographs of the earthquake in his collection. So here we are back to the jail, seeing this picture for the 3rd time. And this card, which I got not that long ago, actually does have scratched onto it that it was the county jail. And once again, you see that toilet and sink. This was behind the old courthouse, and here's the new courthouse. This is a beautiful building, regarded, I think, often as one of the most beautiful kind of public urban city buildings in the country. And this is now I think it's still the jail today. as part of the courthouse complex. So this is the front of the courthouse complex. If you go behind it, you get this wing and then this wing here. So this was where the old jail was. And this is, I think, where the jail is today. And you can see right in here, we also were there today because my wife wasn't along in December, so I was showing her around a bit. But you will find a cornerstone with the year 1927 on it, when the courthouse was rebuilt after the earthquake. So this is the Mission, beautiful building. There's lots of pictures back in the day of the destruction, partial destruction of the Mission. This shows the one of the towers. It looks like it might have been this one here. And there was one death that happened there as a result of the collapse. The Mission has a long history, 1786, founded by the Franciscans. It's still an active church for St. Barbara, and St. Barbara is actually the patron saint of miners. So in the Franklin and Marshall Geology Department, they have long had a St. Barbara's Day, on her feast day, party for students, because she is the closest we have to our own patron saint, if not geologists, at least of miners. There was another quake in the area in 1812, so there was partial some destruction of the Mission from that earthquake, and other missions further south were damaged by that quake. Different add-ons occurred over the years. So in 1820 was the fourth add-on. 1824 was a revolt by the Chumash, who were, what would you say, indentured servants at the Mission. And then in 1925, the earthquake, which actually occurred on the feast day of St. Peter and Paul. So even though the earthquake occurred early in the morning, they were having services at that time. And so the friars felt that earthquake while they were having their prayers. So here's a postcard I bought that shows, this actually got shifted, or I didn't move that. The actual Santa Barbara Mission is this image here. And so the arrow is off too, but the Santa Barbara Mission is right there on the postcard. So this is a postcard I sent to myself in December, and it's of the Mission, and my message on that postcard to self: on my recent trip to Santa Barbara, as we near the Centennial of the 1925 earthquake, I visited the Mission, one of the notable buildings that was damaged by that event. And I actually carried this around for a couple of days. And when I visited the hotel, one of the hotels there that was badly damaged that I showed a picture of, I actually asked the people at the desk to mail that for me. So there's no evidence of that on the card, but I mailed it, or at least dropped it at the Hotel Californian. Okay, again, close to the end here. This is basically a seminary started by the Franciscans that was behind, oh, actually, I could have pointed that out. This is the St. Anthony Seminary back here, or the college. Okay, so it's behind the Mission. And this was the impact of the earthquake on it. And so it's been kind of rebuilt. As many of the buildings, and as I mentioned, in Santa Barbara were, it was rebuilt in Spanish colonial revival style. First floor is Romanesque with these kind of rounded windows. And this also has I don't know if you call that a cornerstone, whatever you call that. It's not quite a keystone, but it has 1925 when the building, I guess, was rebuilt after the earthquake. It's more recently been a secular school, and apparently it was just auctioned off last year for future use that is currently unknown, possibly apartments. And then finally, the Sheffield Dam again. This was the dam after the earthquake. This is that same picture I showed before. This was built as a reservoir in 1917. When it was breached in 1925, it released 30 million gallons of water. Rebuilt a few years later. There's now an underground reservoir there, and this is an open space park. The boulders here actually show the former walls, earthenware walls of that dam. And that's so mentioned on this plaque on one of the boulders. So I think that's my last extreme, semi-extreme deltiology slide, and bringing things to a close here. I've had contact with several people in Santa Barbara that have kind of helped me to varying extents. Rick Clausen actually allowed me to stay in his guest house when I visited in December. And I had some geologic help from Sabina Thomas and Larry Garola. Chris Irvin was the archivist at the library. Actually, Neil Graffey, who I've just exchanged a couple of emails with, is taking us on, and other people, on a walking tour of the earthquake impacted downtown area in about 90 minutes. And Betty Green will be giving a lecture later this week that I'll be attending as well. So it was great to have some help from those people. And there is actually an earthquake, a song for the Santa Barbara earthquake. This was recorded July 10th, 12 days after the earthquake, and by Vernon Dalhart, who was kind of a country music star. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but if this works, I'll give you just a sampling of the song.
Way out in California, among the hills so tall, stands the town of Santa Barbara that they thought would never fall. And then one fatal morning, just before the break of day, when all the town lay sleeping, the hills began to sway.
And I think that's enough. And that, I guess, concludes the talk. So let me go back to where I can see everybody. And I'll be willing to try to.
Very interesting. I always like the background of things. So, questions, people. What do you have? I'll start with a couple. With earthquakes, is there a relationship between the depth and the surface damage? Or
I mean, yeah, so probably, if you have, let's say you're talking about earthquakes of a given magnitude. So a magnitude kind of tells you how much energy is released. So if that happens closer to a populated area, then it will tend to cause more damage. So yeah, a shallower earthquake, everything else being equal, if it's shallower, it will tend to cause more damage.
Okay.
It also depends a little bit on the geology. So if you have, for instance, in San Francisco in the Marina District, it's all sediment. So sediment tends to shake a lot more. If it's hard rock, it's not usually quite as bad.
And it depends, I guess, if it's the middle of the desert, then not as many people care. But,
yeah, exactly.
In 2006, was there a similar type of remembrance centennial for the San Francisco earthquake as there is for this one?
At that point, I wasn't there. There was I know geology meetings, for instance. I think that year the annual meeting of the Geological Society of America was in San Francisco. So they had a lot of they had both, I think, scientific and historical commemorations of that event. I'm pretty sure I wasn't yet collecting earthquake stuff yet, so I didn't make it as more of a special effort to go to any of those things. So.
Okay, good. Other questions, people?
Yeah.
Hi, Rob. Great presentation. two questions. First one, was there any tsunami activity after this, or that did some damage along the coastline?
So should I answer that first?
Go ahead. Mhm.
That's a good question. So actually, so I almost put this in the talk, but then I took it out. When I was here in December, I went to a one antique store. I was sort of looking for postcards of the quake. I didn't, and they had postcards, and I found a couple of San Francisco quake postcards, but none from here. But I did find a magazine which I had seen online, but it was nice to actually buy the magazine with some history of the quake. And so there were reports. So they devoted a page or two in the article to reports of tsunamis that came up State Street a ways, not maybe a foot high, so not terrible, but it did come on land. But apparently, there's no, other than some sort of oral history of that, there seems to be no real written proof. So it's a little bit, I guess, uncertain whether there was or the nature of the tsunami. It's a little bit undocumented.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Second one, neighboring larger cities and towns like Santa Maria or Los Angeles, was there any impact there, or any?
No. It was, pretty much Santa Barbara. I guess I'm not too sure, though certainly Los Angeles is far enough away that it might have been felt, and I guess I don't know that, but it could have been felt, but too far away to really be damaged. I did, in the museum today exhibit, they had newspapers from Santa Barbara, and also newspapers from other cities. And I think it was one of the Santa Barbara papers said, the wasn't felt in Los Angeles or San Francisco or any place else. So it was pretty much just pretty restricted.
Pretty much Santa Barbara. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rob, you're mentioning about, being more postcard oriented tonight. And then it reminded me, one of our members, Doug Milliken, he was a scientist, before retiring, but we were thinking because he was president of the postcard club, the coin club, and the stamp club. So we we're thinking it'd be interesting to do a survey and, maybe get some Venn diagrams of how much overlap they are within our club or, in the local clubs. And I know this, like what we call it, intuitive. A lot of people collect both coins and postcards and the stamps, or two out of three. And my wife is a fountain pen kind of user and collector and calligraphy person. And I was asking her, what else do they collect besides fountain pens? She said, that's easy. Knives and watches go along with their fountain. So you have these clusters of collectibles. So yeah. So I think
I went to a meeting of the Lancaster Post Club, postcard group. Now it's been a year or two now, and I would say, there's certainly overlap. I would say, I don't know if I can stereotype a little bit. Kind of the nature of postcard collectors seems a little bit different than the nature of philatelists. So it's hard to describe why, but I guess
yeah, Al, you were president next to Rob there. You're president of the postcard club too. Any remarks on that? Differences between?
I think the two blend together beautifully, and I'm all in. The philatelic world kind of outlawed postcards for a long time.
To their own detriment.
It's been opened. I have many collections where I combine the two, and they go together beautifully, particularly naval collections. We can have a picture of a ship and then have philatelic material that goes along with that ship. So I think it's time we open up the door and wholeheartedly accepted philately with deltiology. I've been involved in both, and find that they go together real well.
What I find one of the big differences when I'm at the postcard show is the stamp collectors kind of look at the back of the postcard, the cancel. I like the messages, the
Yes.
cancels, the stamps, the clarity. Are they scuffed? And the postcard they like the other side.
In my collection, I think the stamp on the back with the date in particular is very, very important.
Hmm. Yeah, it made a big part of your presentation, the dates,
Yeah.
Yes.
from a couple weeks after to, 1987 or 89.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As
Well,
I was looking at
I
Fritsche
always feel a little
collection,
I feel a little self-conscious talking about my postcards to you guys, but I think it's close enough, and that part of it makes it more philatelic.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
You're showing that Fritsche collection of what, 7,500 postcards. Do you ever get to the feeling when you're there and you're looking around and nobody's looking of Grand Theft Auto? How nice that'd be to have back home. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess these things they belong in the museums, I mean, that's a great place for them. So they were able to make the museum exhibit I saw today was really nice, and it's great to have those resources to draw from. So
Yeah. Good.
Rob,
Other questions, comments, Larry?
yeah. Early on, Rob, you showed something that you said looks like it went through the mail, but there was no postage. If I recall correctly, in San Francisco, the post office sent through mail for some period of time without postage because it, just wasn't possible. Any indication that that might have happened in Santa Barbara?
well, I guess I know that exists. I mean, would there be would there be a stamp, that said kind of no postage, or how would you know that?
Yeah, I guess no, I don't think like in San Francisco, if they didn't have stamps, they didn't want to bother with hand stamps either. But if there was some sort of receiving mark on it, that would be a giveaway.
Yeah, I
But
didn't
but
see
I
any.
think maybe there are just records or memories, got recorded afterwards that people. I saw one in a historical exhibit in San Francisco that somebody wrote a note on a shirt collar stay
Mhm.
and it went through the mail. It got postmarked somewhere along the line.
Yeah, I have read about such things, but I'm not sure I have kind of any. I might have one item in my collection that I'm not remembering any details about that suggests that. But on this, I nothing that I at least recognize that would indicate that. And I haven't read anything that occurred for the Santa Barbara quake.
Okay.
But
Maybe you guys can clarify, but I think I remember hearing something related to a collection of some natural disaster, whether it's the John Towns flood or San Francisco, but for a while they let people in the area send for free. Just because they didn't have stamps, they couldn't get them, and just help the people out. Because
Yeah,
their
I'm
internet,
pretty
let
sure
people
that
know
was
we're alive.
true.
Yeah.
I'm
What was
pretty
that?
sure that was true in San Francisco in
Okay.
1906.
now I did see. I'm not sure I've seen it. So there was a video clip that I saw, and I think it was on the webpage for the EQ25.org that's organizing the events. They had a video clip that included a second or two of showing them sorting mail in the street. So, so the post office,
Yeah.
at least one of them was still operating out there on the street. But
That'd be a great postcard.
The building that was the main post office in 1906, which is now still a federal building in use, but the first floor has been preserved as an exhibit, and the postal windows are still there and stuff, and they have some really nice photographs of the earthquake and postal workers and you know and such. It was very interesting when I visited it some years ago.
that was part. So when I did the poster for the open house last year on the Long Beach earthquake, um, no, I'm getting confused. That was in my other previous talk to the group about earthquakes. Um, so the post office actually in town collapsed, and so they had the USS Constitution had done postmarks on some outgoing mail that morning, and then they actually cleared through the post office in the city right before the earthquake. And then the post office collapsed during the quake, and actually a couple of postal workers were killed. But they also ended up working out in the street after the earthquake occurred.
Yeah.
Hey, Rob, this is Lou. More of a geological question than a philatelic question. I'm assuming that they're still watching these areas. You highlighted many areas that are earthquake zones. Is there any possibility that this could occur again in that area?
Oh, definitely. I mean, so it's a seismic zone. It's kind of still active, so they'll happen again. Despite efforts, we still can't really predict earthquakes. You can make probabilistic statements, something like there's a 50% chance that in the next 25 years there will be a magnitude 6 earthquake or something like that. But that's about the best they can really do. But for sure, if you're on a major fault or in an earthquake prone area, they'll happen again.
So there's a possibility then that we could actually celebrate the 200th occurrence of this, 200-year occurrence of this at a later date.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they'll happen again. And
start collecting now.
Yeah, maybe I'll hear more about that during the week about, kind of what people are at least now doing the best thing you can do is just build your buildings better to minimize damage for future quakes. And there are warning systems and things like that. But yeah, maybe I'll hear more about that this week.
Interesting. Thank you.
Sure, Lou.
This is Mike Bach. Question. Well, in your presentation, you noted that 85% of the downtown area was destroyed. But then you had a picture, another postcard of people outside who were displaced. Is there any record of how many people got displaced in that?
No, I've also read some or seen some kind of seems to be some dispute about how badly the downtown was really hit. So, I've seen that number several places, so I put that out there. I've seen it said that it wasn't nearly as bad as all that. So, so I'm not sure. And in terms of people displaced, I guess I haven't really seen anything.
Okay.
Yeah, there is.
No, it's just interesting that there was a postcard of people displaced, but
Yeah. There's some like that also for the San Francisco earthquake. But I think two of the speakers I'll hear this week in different events either have finished or are finishing books on the 1925 earthquake. So there's more that I can still learn.
Okay.
People that know a lot more than I do. So.
Okay. Great presentation, though. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Other questions, people?
Well, yes, if I may ask one more. When it comes to earthquakes, were there any significant earthquakes on the island of Sicily that you're aware of? They have a volcano there.
So they have Etna, of course, which is probably the worst hazard. So there are a lot of earthquakes in Italy. I'm not going to be able to say I know of a specific one, but I think there have been earthquakes there kind of as well. The whole Italian peninsula is earthquake prone.
Yeah, Al, my parents were on vacation in the Dolomites, and one night they were in their hotel room and the walls rippled. So they do happen in Italy.
It does happen.
For sure. In Italy, there have been, I guess there was a very famous earthquake in Messina earlier in, well, it was, I guess, in the early 1900s. And I see actually a fair number of postcards for that, but I try to stay geographically restricted. And there have been other significant earthquakes, certainly in mainland Italy. I think there probably have been some on Sicily, but I just kind of can't name any.
I was thinking the relationship between volcanoes and earthquakes, if there is any.
So a lot of volcanoes also occur at plate boundaries. Um, because when you get these one plate diving beneath another, to simplify it a bit, you tend to bubble magma off the subducting plate and rises up to the surface. So the same kind of plate interactions tend to create earthquakes and volcanoes in the same area, but you don't necessarily get volcanoes themselves are sometimes associated with smaller earthquakes that are related to the rising up of the magma within the volcano. So you tend to get them, in similar areas for the general underlying reason of kind of plates interacting with each other. So now you don't, so on the San Andreas Fault, because the plates are sliding by each other, you don't get volcanoes, okay? But if you go up into the northwest, into the Cascade Zone, there you actually get a smaller plate, the Juan de Fuca plate, which just subduct beneath the North American plate. So there you do get volcanoes like Mount Rainier and the other volcanoes near it, the other stratovolcanoes, and you get earthquakes as well. So it partly depends on the type of plate boundary. You wouldn't get the volcanoes at the sliding boundaries and also not too much at the spreading boundaries. But where you get subduction, you can get both earthquakes and volcanoes.
Okay.
And Rob, the separation effect of earthquakes, that's not very common, is it?
Well, so those kinds of boundaries where plates move apart are more common in the ocean basin, because when the plates start spreading apart, it tends to then subside and fill with ocean water. So there's plenty of earthquakes out there. Let's say, earthquakes in Iceland are related to that, and earthquakes along the mid-Atlantic ridge are related to that. You don't get quite as much of that on land. East Africa is rifting apart, and that's still on land, although it might become an ocean basin one day. So you'll get earthquakes there. But a lot of those spreading locations are in the oceans, so you wouldn't get impacts of those.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a question that can be answered, but if we looked at the Earth as the size of a basketball, the liquid molten core inside, how big would that be? Did we know? Like a baseball size or softball size? Or
Well, so I used to know these numbers pretty well before I retired. So the Earth is, and I'll do it in kilometers, the Earth is about 6,400 kilometers. It's about, I guess, 4,000 miles in radius. And it's 2,900 kilometers down to the core. So I will say, so I'm just ballparking this, that the core might be maybe 30% of the Earth by volume, something like that.
Good, thank you.
One personal note, if I may throw in something very personal. My wife and I were playing Scrabble up in the Reading area when we had a local earthquake that hit and messed up the Scrabble board. So whoever's leading lost their lead automatically. And that was up the Reading area. We moved down to the Lancaster area, and there's a gentleman from Millersville at one of the meetings I attended that, like yourself, was an expert in earthquakes. And he said, well, moving to Lancaster didn't free you any from getting earthquakes, that Lancaster could be prone to them.
That would have been Charlie Scharnberger. And
it was him. Yeah.
He was kind of, actually, he and I started off studying, both of us were studying the Earth's magnetic field, but he became more of an expert on local earthquakes. So he was usually the go-to person for the media when there was a local earthquake. And if he was unavailable, they might come to me. But there are earthquakes in Lancaster County that the ones that happened, I want to say these were 40 years ago, maybe not quite that long, but were like magnitude 4. And they could be felt, but I think one of them cracked some plaster in a few houses, but that was all. And they're not related particularly to plate tectonics, but sort of some of the local geologic structures kind of focused stress enough to cause these small earthquakes. But we're never going to, I want to say we're unlikely to ever get
It was
a
him.
real good one.
Other comments, questions for